and also outlined the bodies of those people sadly have passed away because of our inhumane refugee policy. There's also chalk for writing down messages. Please take some chalk. We're going to be taking photos and sending them directly to Manus Island.
We're here to defend the rights of the people detained on Manus and Nauru because it's just wrong. These people don't have their own rights or their own voices, so we're here to defend them. Yeah.
But we are here today because we are standing in solidarity with all the hunger strikers in Manus Island. There have been over 700 people that are on hunger strike protesting the most horrific, inhumane treatment of asylum seekers that I have ever witnessed or any of us have witnessed before. Some of us are wearing these shirts that say Reza Barati. We don't want any more deaths in our offshore processing camps or in any detention centres. We don't want any detention centres, that's right. We are here because we are sick of the suffering of refugees at our government's hands. We are sick of seeing people die, sick of seeing children born in detention. We are sick of seeing millions and billions of dollars going to offshore processing. But lastly, I think we need to say that we're here because we all have a heart. We all are here because we want to see a much better way to treat refugees and welcome them to our community. So we've got lots of...
There's a man currently in Melbourne for treatment who I go and visit who can't walk properly. He's got brain damage from being whacked on the head with a lump of wood. The other thing that sparked it was the lack of running water. The pumps have been cut off. There's no date for when that'll be fixed. No toilets being flushed, no showers. And finally, just 18 months of indefinite detention without being processed, without any sign of safe and permanent resettlement. And what has Peter Dutton, the new Immigration Minister's response been to all of this? It is. I think he's copied from Scott Morrison's playbook. It's to lie and deny. So for the first day, he denied there was a hunger strike until video and audio and pictures came out and said that there were. 2 days ago, he said that it had been resolved peacefully. It turns out, and you heard today, it hasn't been resolved. In terms of peaceful, he's now said actually a degree of force was used against the asylum seekers in Delta compound. He said this was because of threats of violence. Now this is absolute nonsense. Not only did the asylum seekers have banners saying peaceful, no violence, these were people who hadn't eaten for 8 days. They couldn't move. They were beaten like dogs and they could not move. Peter Dutton's response has also been to deny that asylum seekers were denied water. It's been a hot day here today. I've been drinking a lot, but they were denied water for 3 days. If you want to go and see, go to the website www.rac-vic.org. You can see the video, you can see the pictures, and you can judge for yourself. And Tony Abbott, in these last couple of weeks, has talked a lot in the aftermath of the killings at Charlie Hebdo about freedom of speech and about terrorism. We say, what about freedom of speech for asylum seekers? Why can't journalists go in? Why can't they have phones? Why were the phones that they had got in seized when Delta compound was raided? Tony Abbott has said, well, actually, maybe they should look at weakening protections over racist speech. Why can there be free speech for racism, but not for the victims of it? And a tip for Tony, there's one way that you can end terrorism, and that is to stop facilitating it, to stop participating in it. It is torture to deny people water. It is a form of terror to beat people on hunger strike when they are not moving. It is a form of torture to keep people indefinitely detained when they have committed no crime, when they have fled persecution.
So I'm a lawyer and I represent a number of asylum seekers, including people that have been in detention on Manus Island, also on Nauru, and up until recently a number of my clients were languishing for over a year on Christmas Island. So first of all, I think it's pretty exciting that there's a rally going on in New York City, but I'm also kind of ashamed about that, because what is going on in Australia when people are gathering in New York to condemn our human rights abuses? I just think that's really shameful. So the RACS team asked me to talk a little bit about the law in relation to asylum seekers, and I think it's pretty obvious to everyone here that the government today doesn't have much respect for the law in relation to asylum seekers, and that's something I'm made aware of every single day, and it's getting worse every single day. The government would have you all believe that the legal system in relation to offshore processing is incredibly complex. But I want to be very clear about something today. It's incredibly simple. The Immigration Minister has the power to return every single one of those men currently on Manus Island to Australia and process them. He has that power under Australian law, and he can do it today. He chooses not to do that. We also know that with enough public pressure from the legal sector, pressure from the media, we can force the Minister to exercise this discretion. We know this because just before Christmas, we were successful in having over 100 Australian-born babies and their families released from detention into the Australian community because of public pressure and the legal action we took, and we can do it again. These babies and their families were set to be transferred to Nauru, and it just shows you what we can do if we band together. I represent one young man who was injured in the Manus Island riots, and I've sat down with him on a few occasions and been privileged enough to talk to him about what his experience on Manus Island was like, because not many people get that opportunity. It's no coincidence that they detain people offshore on Manus Island, on Nauru, soon to be in Cambodia. It's because they don't want people accessing lawyers, they don't want people having access to media, and they don't want us, the general public, to know what's going on there. But my client was injured terribly, physically, in the riots that happened, and his description about what happened that night, but also what life in detention on Manus Island is like, is absolutely horrific. Let's not forget that there's 250 asylum seekers currently on Manus Island who've been detained there since August 2013. That's 18 months. What is going on? Not a single person has been resettled into the Papua New Guinean community. And my client tells me that although his physical injuries are horrific, he's lost his right eye and he won't ever see in that eye again. It's the mental injuries that continue to haunt him. And those injuries continued to get worse when they brought him back to Australia, where he continued to languish in detention until just before Christmas. In fact, the government's own psychologist wrote a report telling the government that the longer they kept him in detention, the more he would continue to deteriorate. And that's because seeing the fences, seeing the barbed wire, seeing the guards acted as triggers for him that were causing flashbacks to that night in February. The government ignored this report and continued to keep him in detention for months. So I just want to make this very clear today. Minister Dutton has the power to bring these men back to Australia and to process them in Australia, to give them the medical treatment they need and to show them the respect that they deserve, and he chooses not to do that. So we need to all today call on Minister Dutton and increase the pressure to make him do his duty and bring these men back to Australia. Thanks.
So we're here today because we're in solidarity, we're having a demonstration in solidarity with hunger strikers in Papua New Guinea, in the Australian Detention Centre in Papua New Guinea. There are demonstrations around Australia today and tomorrow about this issue. About 900 men have gone on hunger strike. They're terribly scared of 8 of them being resettled into the community in Papua New Guinea. And they're scared because there have been death threats against the men in the detention centre. People have had their lives threatened. In fact, last year around this time, locals, guards and the PNG mobile squad entered the detention centre and conducted a massacre, leaving 1 man dead. So we have grave fears for the lives of the asylum seekers, both in the hunger strike that they're conducting and the consequence of them being resettled in Papua New Guinea. And we're demanding of our Immigration Minister and Prime Minister that those people on Manus Island in Papua New Guinea be resettled in Australia immediately.
It is so important. It is absolutely vital that we have voices for compassion and empathy in our parliaments. Because when we don't, we get the lies, we get the cover-up, we get the spin and the cruelty that we are seeing unfold inside the Manus Island Detention Centre, other detention centres around this country, and of course towards the children and families who are also detained on Nauru. I've been watching with sadness over the last week as to what has been happening inside the Manus Island camp. I, like many activists and advocates around the country, have received phone calls, messages, people pleading for their right to live a free life with dignity and respect. That's all these men are asking for. What happened to us as a country when we thought that it was okay to torture somebody so poorly, so badly, that their soul starts to die and they give up everything? That is what is happening to the people inside the Manus Island Detention Centre. And when I was on Manus a year or so ago, it was horrific. I can't imagine. I was there for 3 days. I can't imagine what it would be like to have to live like that for 18 months with no hope, with no dignity, with no humanity and no respect. The man that we listened to, John, down the telephone earlier, and he said, "We are ready to die." What other message does a Prime Minister need to hear to understand he has gone too far? This is enough. And of course, the Prime Minister and the Immigration Minister, Mr. Dutton, the new Immigration Minister, have spent this week, after days of denying that this was even happening, have now decided to turn around and blame everybody else. It's the advocates' fault that this is happening. It's the refugees' fault this is happening. Well, no, Minister. This is the human result of a harsh policy. For months, for years, this government has been saying, look at us, we are so tough. We're going to do whatever it takes to break these people. Well, they are broken. Congratulations. Job well done. You can't blame anyone else for this human misery. This is the result of a cruel policy designed to break people. The fact is, the government wanted to convince people that if they could be as cruel as possible, everybody would choose to go home. That's if you could go home. That's if you weren't a refugee. After 18 months of suffering in silence, of being treated appallingly, of having no human rights, no dignity, everything about a human being stripped from you, if you haven't opted to go home by now, that's because you can't. And that's the reality for the people inside Manus Island. They have no other choice. That is what frightens me to my core about what is going on this week inside Manus Island. I am very fearful that somebody will die. I am very fearful that the people inside that camp have given up all hope, and this is their last gasp. This is them using the only weapon that they have: their voice and their bodies. Minister Dutton said that they had to use force to break into one of the compounds the other day because there were weapons in there. When challenged over what those weapons were, it found out they were mobile phones. Mobile phones. Why? Because the minister knows that the most powerful weapon these people have left on them is their voice. And if that is taken from them, it is up to us. It is up to us to raise our voices for them. The Minister has no right to take that away from them. I plead with everybody inside to not give up hope, to not harm themselves, to not hurt themselves. It's an awful situation they are in. I've called on the Minister to send an independent team in to talk, because no one trusts his government, no one trusts his department, and no one trusts the guards. There needs to be an independent assessment of how we get out of this awful mess for these people. It needs to be done in the best interest of human rights, the best interest of these people's future, not in the best interest of the Prime Minister's poll results, which, as we know, are all very terrible. Manus Island needs to be closed down. There is absolutely no way this detention camp can do its job of looking after people. There is nothing humane about a detention centre, full stop. There is nothing humane about a detention centre on a remote island in Papua New Guinea. I don't care what the Labor Party says about if you had all the checks and balances it would work. It doesn't. It won't. The only option is to close the madness down.
Sorry, it's a bit noisy, all these people chanting around me, but there's a lot we can do at every level of government. The most important thing is that we have people in Parliament who are a voice of compassion, no matter what Parliament they're in. And although refugees and treatment of asylum seekers is a federal issue, there are some things we can do to help people at a state level. A lot of the refugees who've been released into the community have chosen to be settled in Melbourne, and so many volunteers are working to help make their lives better. And there's a lot that our state government can do in terms of providing social support for these people who've had everything taken away from them, and that's the kind of thing that I'll be pushing for.
The Greens are obviously very concerned with what is going on inside the Manus Island Detention Centre. When Parliament resumes in a couple of weeks, we'll be pushing for a proper explanation from the government, exactly what the government was doing, how they treated people, and of course continue our campaign to get the camp shut down. There is nothing humane about the Manus Island Detention Centre. The people there deserve freedom. They deserve to be treated with humanity and respect, with decency. And the Australian Parliament must make sure the Australian people know what is going on and being done in their name.
We have been in Manus for 18 months to 19 months. And since we've been in this place, the government told us that they are going to do the process for us. We did our process. After we finish the process, they are telling us that every day you guys are going to do resettlement in Manus. You guys are going to do resettlement in Manus next week, next month. We are working next week, next month until 18 months is over or 19 months is over and nothing happened. And all the people in Manus Island, they are really, really sick and tired from from the harsh environment here in Manus Island. And they have decided to do a hunger strike in order to draw the attention of the government that why the government keeps some hostages in Manus Island. We call ourselves as an Australian hostages in Manus Island because Australia is paying money every month to PNG government. As you know, PNG government is a corrupt country and they are keeping the us in this place. And today, I want to assure you that 859 people, they are on a hunger strike today. 7 days, some of them, they have 8 days, they haven't eaten and they haven't drink. They are still in their hunger strike. And to be honest, our hunger strike is going to continue. We are not going to give up on this hunger strike. Even though it's going to cost us the death of our lives, we will die, and we know that we die as we are with our dignity.
They say childhood is a vital stage in helping you develop in the person who you are in prison. Well, my childhood was a war-prone, anti-school, and being trapped in a detention center in my early stages of life. It was a life or death situation. We fled the dangerous ocean waters on a boat. Sadly, being on a risky boat was safer than staying in Afghanistan and dying a random, unexpected death. Yesterday, 10 people were killed on a roadside bombing in Afghanistan, in the province Jaghuri in Afghanistan. And 5 of those people that passed away were from the same family. And this happens regularly in Afghanistan and is a perfect example of the ongoing violence in Afghanistan against Hazaras. I mean, my country, you've got to realize, Afghanistan has given me nothing except for pain and suffering. Our people, Hazaras, we have been persecuted throughout history. We're not safe in Afghanistan nor in Pakistan. And this is evident that when we do risk our lives and come here in Australia, we end up being tortured in those detention centers. Our boat was identified by the Marines and we were taken to Nauru Detention Center, where we were identified as refugees and were kept to be processed. I spent close to 3 years there and never went to school. But the hardest part was that I was away from my parents. I did not have the support of my parents. I did not have them with me. How could they lock up a child in a detention center? Fellow refugees around me were losing hope, and a few of them started protesting and displaying physical demonstration of pain, like sewing their lips together and going on a hunger strike. Our health, mind and hope are all deteriorating. The news of people sewing their lips got on the media, and we had an overwhelming support of the Australian people. But nowadays, what's happening on Manus Island, nearly 900 people on hunger strike, plus those who sewed their lips. I mean, nowadays, that message that they're sending, it sounds like it's powerless. No one cares about it, but we need to get up together and fight for it. What is happening to our country, but most of all, what is happening to humanity?
Once you go onto birth,